Okay, let's see. Good morning, everyone. Hope that I've got everything set where we can see it. I'm outside because the weather is beautiful. Hopefully, the glare from the sun is not going to get in our way. So, today we are going to talk about sports safety in a pandemic. And then you can see behind me right here, I've got my pick board for the SEC games. So, just a note about that, I'm going to do that at the end, and I'm gonna pick my winners. And I had a friend of mine, Fielding, challenge me that if I made these picks, he would donate some money to a charity of my choice. So I chose our local junior auxiliary here in Starkville so that we can support some of the kids in our area. All of our projects go toward supporting kids in the area in various ways. So if you feel inclined to do that, you can see my post on my page for further details, but we're just doing donations to the Venmo account. That's JA-Starkville. So you can find them easily and make any donation of your choice. So any little bit will help as far as that's concerned. So we'll get to that towards the end. Just to start out, just a couple of general updates for COVID and things in the pandemic. As most of you guys know, the governor let our statewide mandate for masks expire this week. But just an update, masks are still very important and still strongly recommended and encouraged. So I really encourage you guys to still wear those. A lot of the local governments, like here in Starkville, still mandates that masks are worn in any public place, public business, anything like that. So make sure that you keep an eye on those things because it is still mandated in a lot of places. But we've definitely seen a big drop in cases after we began to require masks. So really keep that in mind. I think it really does work and it's really important. So I really encourage you to continue doing that. That's probably the biggest COVID related update. And then additionally, make sure that you get your flu shots. It's now October, and that's generally when we recommend flu shots anyway. So if you have not gotten one of those, make sure that you get those here in the next few weeks, definitely by the end of the month, and protect yourself from that as well. So we're going to move on to just some of my general topics and helpful reminders for sports in a pandemic. I know a lot of us here in the South are focused on football, and that's a big sport. Definitely an exciting time for us here in Starkville because we had a big win last week, so that was exciting. But there's a lot of other sports too. So high school all the way to the collegiate level, all the way down to the little kids that are just doing recreational sports too. So all of this stuff can apply to those things. Obviously, our younger individuals and our athletes who are pretty healthy, we think of being in a lower risk category in general for COVID. And so we do think for the most part they're going to be less symptomatic and have a milder course of illness. But there are a lot of things that we still need to monitor for. Number one, we want to be as safe as we can and limit the spread because I know a lot of people that are really anxious to get back to sports. You want to be able to continue to have your sports. And so if you get a certain number of people on the team or exposed, if somebody turns up positive, then that's going to shut down your sport for a little bit. So it's really important to be safe, not only for people's health, but a lot of this coincides with people's mental health. It's an enjoying activity. People like to do it. And so for that reason, so that we can keep things going, really try to be safe as well. So like I've talked about in some of my other videos and posts, all of this stuff kind of has a spectrum. So definitely those contact sports that you're a lot closer together, breathing more closely together, are going to be higher risk. Certainly things that happen indoors usually are going to be higher risk. And then that goes all the way down to things like golf or tennis, for example, that are outside, less people, and usually pretty spread apart. Cross country, track running, that kind of stuff is going to be a little bit lower risk too. So still all of those things that we've been implementing as far as our general guidelines for the pandemic, using good hygiene, keeping a distance, and being outside in a well-ventilated area are really important. So any way that we can do that and limit exposure as much as possible is going to be really important. So that can mean doing, shifts of practice so that you have less people there, practicing maybe a few days with like the offense only or the defense only, so that you limit everyone's general exposure to each other. That can help cut down on any exposure, and potentially if you have someone that's positive, maybe you don't have to quarantine the entire team. So those kinds of things are just good general topics to keep in mind. When we get to hygiene, one thing that's important is a lot of the time in sports in general, we're sharing water bottles or snacks or things like that are usually like a community area that players or kids can come and grab, something to drink or a snack if they need it. Really good idea to keep those individualized, maybe make like a little snack bag or keep them kind of lined up separately so that it's easy to grab and go and we're not having to have a lot of overlap. Do it kind of in an organized fashion or split up into groups so that everyone is not swarming around all of that stuff at one time. So just some kind of basic common sense stuff for those kind of scenarios and environments. Definitely masks are still going to be important. So if you're on the bench or on the sidelines or not participating, even if you are outside, in sports a lot of the time we're going to be closer to each other anyway, so that 6 feet may not always be something that people are observing. But if you can wear a mask when you're in those closer settings, even if you're outside while you're not being active and doing the sport or playing in the game, or during practice, that's going to be something that's going to further help and decrease transmission and everything. So those are just some important kind of key things to keep in mind for practice and playing games and things like that. So let me check my list to make sure I've covered all the general stuff as far as playing and practice. Yes. So spectating. That's another big topic, whether you're going to be going to games or if you're going to be watching at home. A lot of people really like to have get-togethers for football games or other events. We kind of have the trifecta. All the sporting events are going on at the same time right now, the big ones like football and baseball and basketball. So there's a lot of opportunity to get together for a game. So if you're doing that at home and you want to hang out with some friends or some family at the same time, just remember to keep all these key guidelines in mind. So if you can do an outdoor setup, the weather is perfect for that right now. So if you can do that, set up, in the carport or the garage, have a TV up, some chairs out and spread apart. If maybe it's a little rainy or cloudy or you can't get the TV and stuff set up outside, try to do it indoors, but have it set up where you can keep a distance. Open the doors, open the windows so that you can get really good ventilation. Definitely a better idea to wear masks when you're inside, especially if you're with people who are outside of your bubble or your quarantine. So that's one good thing to keep in mind. If you're going to have snacks and food and drinks and all that kind of stuff, usually that's kind of a buffet style thing. So just make sure that you have a lot of hand sanitizer available and all that stuff. Try to avoid sharing serving utensils and that kind of thing. So anything that you can prep that can be kind of individualized or pick up really easily without having to kind of touch other things or share serving utensils can be really helpful too. So those are just some kind of easy tips for if you do want to get together. I know it's hard. I want to do the same thing, but we still really need to be mindful of all of those things. One of my favorite things from the update this week from the health department that Dr. Dobbs mentioned is that the rules of COVID have not changed. So nothing has changed as far as how contagious it is and how you can catch it and get it. All those things are the same. So we just have to keep that in mind as we move forward. I know everyone is tired, but we really need to play by COVID rules right now because it's still something that is really important to continue doing, especially as we enter into the cooler weather where we're going to be inside more than we have been over the summer and everything. So the last topic I'm going to touch on before we get to my picks over here is going to be what to do when you have a player who has tested positive, what to do with the players when they're exposed, and then how to go about returning to play after that. So definitely the same rules are going to apply to any sports team as they would if you were exposed or test positive in general. So the updated guidelines for if you test positive, you're under at least a 10-day quarantine where you are completely isolated, and you've got to stay, at home, no fun activities, and that 10-day time period is up, assuming that your symptoms are improved and you're fever free for 24 to 72 hours before that 10-day period is up. So that's really important to keep in mind if you do test positive. For those who are exposed to a positive case, which means you are within 6 feet for over 15 minutes of cumulative time in those few days before the person tests positive, if you're exposed in that setting, then it is still recommended that you quarantine and isolate yourself at home for 14 days, because we know that you could still develop symptoms and become positive up to 14 days after your exposure. So if you are exposed and you get a test 5 days later and it's negative, that doesn't mean you can go back out and do your normal activity. So it's really important to understand that distinction for anybody that's on a sports team or in a classroom or at work and there's a positive individual. All of those people who were exposed to that person have to quarantine for 14 days. So that's really important key thing to remember. So when we're talking about those athletes who do test positive, the return to play, I got a little bit of help from my friends down at Hattiesburg Clinic that are in the sports medicine program there. They've developed some really good resources, and I'll tag the link in the comments afterwards just in case you have any questions or want to look over those things. You guys can check out their website. But basically, it kind of depends on the individual symptoms. Of course, if they have other chronic conditions, which most of our young athletes are not going to have very much of, but it's certainly possible. Definitely asthma is one that's really common in kids. So it's important that we understand those underlying conditions, and then we look at how sick they were, so the severity of their symptoms and how long they last, and then we kind of make an individualized plan for any testing or workup, and kind of returning to play, practice, and games both, based on those things. So in general, for those who have had minimal or kind of mild to moderate symptoms, we're going to kind of monitor those things. You're definitely going to have to complete at least that 10-day quarantine or isolation time frame, and then be sure that your symptoms are improved or resolved before you even think about going back to practice or playing in games. We generally recommend a kind of graduated, slow return to play. So at least take a break while you're sick and during that isolation time frame. And then it's going to be a really slow return to practice. So over several days time period, you want to slowly get back into those sports. So you don't want to go and do a full day of practice, or your first day back, you don't want to go play a full game, because there are some risks there. Certainly our athletes who have had a more severe illness, certainly if they require a hospital stay, those individuals are going to automatically need to get some further workup and more specific medical clearance before they really return. So anyone that's got really severe symptoms, if they're hospitalized or they're still having a lot of really tired or fatigue, no energy, any difficulty with breathing, anything like that, we're at a minimum going to recommend that we do some testing on potentially breathing function, at least an EKG, probably an ultrasound of the heart to examine that a little bit more closely and really monitor that a little bit more closely to make sure that they are in an optimal place to be able to return to practice or games. In that milder or moderate category of athletes who do not have that many symptoms, we still want to monitor those things carefully. So if you test positive for coronavirus, you really should consult with your primary care doctor about when it's safe for you to return. In general, we're going to recommend those same things. Definitely, if you're still having some symptoms, feeling tired or shortness of breath, we're going to consider doing at least an EKG. That's one of our best kind of screening tools to look and see if you're showing any signs of the myocarditis, which is the primary thing that we are worried about, especially in athletes returning. And then we'll kind of take that from there depending on those things. Definitely one thing to keep in mind as you do return to your practice or your games, if you experience any symptoms, so any difficulty with your normal amount of activity that you're used to doing, or any issues with chest pain, shortness of breath, chest tightness, anything like that that you experience either while you're practicing or playing or afterwards, you really need to sit down and talk to your primary care doctor about that so that you can kind of re-strategize and figure out the best plan for you depending on your symptoms. So biggest thing is to be on the lookout for any symptoms and always check with your doctor if you have any questions or concerns about that. So I think that covers most of the general kind of safety tips that I've got for handling sports in a pandemic. Again, I'll put a link to those Hattiesburg Clinic guidelines that I think are really helpful in the comments once I'm finished up here so that you can visit that if you would like to. So we're going to move on to the picks back here, and I hope that you guys can see this. I'm going to get situated. I'm wearing my alma mater gear today, so I went to Millsaps, go Majors, and then we're going to do the picks for the SEC. So I'm going to get you guys situated where we can kind of see that a little bit better. So let's see here. We'll move up a little bit closer around all my gear here. And let's see here. So we're going to start. We've got from the morning games all the way to the afternoon, and then our highlight of the day, the MSU versus Arkansas game. So I've got my stickers all planned out here, and let's see where you guys can see me. I'm going to pick in two ways. So we're going to pick just a straight winner and a loser, which is how I go about things. And then my husband told me I had to pick against the spread, and so I'm going to give my spread picks as well. For those of you who don't know what that means, like me, the spread is basically all the powers that be in the world of sports pick the winner of a game, but they pick how many points they're going to win by. And so if I pick the spread, for example, we'll just go with the Auburn-Georgia game. If I pick Georgia to win here, that means they have to leave. You can't quite see the 7.5, but that means they have to win by 7.5 points. And so if I picked them and they only won by 6 points, then I would lose that pick. If I picked them and they won by 10 points, for example, then I would win that. So that's a little bit confusing. So that's why I'm going to do my regular win-lose, and then we're going to do my picks. And then I had spares to do some additional picks, but I think I left AJ's list inside. So let's see here. We'll start with South Carolina and Florida. So my general pick for South Carolina, Florida, I'm going to go with Florida on this one. I'm pretty sure that they're going to be able to get that win pretty easily. The spread for Florida and South Carolina favors Florida to win by 16.5 points. And I think for that one, I am going to go with Florida on that. So we're going to pick them for the spread on that one. Next game is Mizzou versus Tennessee. And I'm definitely going to go with Tennessee on that one for the big win. And then the spread on that game is that Tennessee wins by 12 points. And let's see here. I think that they can probably do that pretty easily. So I'm going to go with the spread on that one as well. Now, next up is they're at the bottom, A&M and Bama. And let's see, I'm definitely going to go with Bama on that. We're going to pick them. I'm not sure that A&M is going to let them win by 18, though, or more. And so that's the spread on that. And so I'm actually going to go with A&M on that one. So we're going to go with that. And then, let's see, next up we've got the U of M, the good old Miss school up north versus Kentucky. I think that Kentucky is going to pull that one out and win Fingers crossed, everybody. So I think Kentucky's going to win that. The spread there is Kentucky by just over 7 points. And I don't know, I think Ole Miss can sometimes get a little surprising. You never know what they're going to do. So I think I'm actually going to go with Ole Miss for the spread on that one. And then Auburn, Georgia. This is the toughest pick in my opinion. So I think that I'm going to take Georgia on this. But they are favored in the spread by 7.5. And I think that Auburn's going to make it closer than that. So we're going to go with Auburn pick on that. So it's going to be a close game there, I think. Next one at the bottom in the middle is LSU and Vandy. I think most everybody will probably be with me on this. Sorry, Vandy, but I think LSU is going to win that one. I don't know, though. LSU last week, we kind of killed it. So I think I'm going to go with Vandy on the spread. I don't think they can get 21-point lead on Vandy for that. So I'm going to go with Vandy on the spread for that one. Now, big game in the week, most important in my household, is MSU versus Arkansas. But my husband's pretty superstitious, and I'm with him on that. So I'm not going to pick this game because I don't want to jinx us. So not allowed to pick on that one. But I will say, Hail State. And I hope you guys have a great Saturday. We'll see how my picks turn out. Don't forget to donate if you want to. Venmo, JA-Starkville, and you can see my post for more details. I hope you all have a great game day.